one thing you said from your time in Perform is that you were doing many different things.
Yeah.
And I think the industry in general has evolved from a single or main revenue source that was media rights to many different things. So
100%.
the business model is not anymore simple of, you just do your games, produce your game, distribute them with broadcaster, and you build everything essentially around media rights.
Yeah.
To now you have to do a lot of things.
Totally.
Events, sponsorship, media rights deals for live content, highlights packages, repurposing multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're trying to do a little bit differently of in Peak Media. So what are you doing right now? With Peak?
Go 100%. And I it's a good segue, because I think what you've said there is what's been amazing over the last couple of years. I think that the verticals of how money was made in the sports industry were narrow in the first couple of years. Things have fragmented because more monetization possibilities have been created. Of course, the digitalization has changed the world, and it's continuing to change the world. And in fact, I would say right now we're in a place where, as things fragmented and as things got kind of put into their verticals, you ended up having specialists that were dedicated to just one or two or three, and they were very much kept separate. But I think what we're seeing now is it's not good enough, but I think it's important as we think about the next couple of steps in the industry to not just think about your media strategy in isolation. You absolutely have to think about how that is affecting your advertising revenue, how that is affecting your engagement, how that is affecting your everything in terms of. So that's why it's in a really interesting space right now. Us at Peak, we effectively, again, we're sitting ourselves in a situation whereby, again, we are created by a lot of guys, the exec team from DAZN. So we kind of embody what is some great first-hand experience there from Perform years and kind of selling content, and then continue to in the global partnerships. DAZN side in terms of understanding the difficulties and the intricacy of making it work from the other side. We've added some fantastic talent from elsewhere across the industry as well. So effectively what we're trying to do is, knowing that the world is very much changing, and knowing that change can not cause fear, but can be quite daunting for quite a lot of people if they're not ready to start changing the way they look at things. We're seeing ourselves in a situation where we want to go in and position ourselves as a growth partner to effectively rights holders, organizations, and think, okay, the next 10 years are going to be completely different from the previous 10 years.
Yeah.
Therefore, the way in which you need to start thinking about these things are going to need new creative solutions and different ways of thinking at. And so we're coupling, I guess, this experience that we had prior and a true belief, and let's talk about it in a minute in terms of who the new players are, who the new people that are ending up monetizing content. They all have different business models that are completely different. And I think what can be scary for some is if you think about new players coming on the block and thinking about just wiping everyone out. And I don't think really that's the case. And I think the way in which that we will continue to see this grow is, okay, there's new players on the block, but how can we allow them to enter? How can we find them an access point that makes sense for them, that maybe doesn't ruin what is an original business for existing players out there? I think the technology is going to do that. It's going to provide different monetization methods that we're not thinking about right now.
Absolutely.
But it's absolutely important to, and us as a growth partner, a key partner with LALIGA, and we're continuing to do, and we can get into some of the projects that we're doing for other rights holders out there, is exactly that, is knowing that every single one of these new players that come in is using data absolutely at the forefront. The one thing that doesn't really change, consumption definitely changes, but the fan and the number of fans is quite constant. That the efficient keeps as it is again so we're going to have to provide a level of detail and a level of analysis and sophisticated to do the work, to understand their business models, to understand how they can come in. What I think we saw, and one frustration from our side, was that relationship between seller or rights holder with their content, thinking, how do I distribute this to make as much revenue as possible, combined with who are your buyers, has changed entirely. And so I think previously it was a bit of a one size fits all. And I think we just realized that you absolutely cannot continue to do that. You need to take the effort to put yourselves in the shoes of others, work and generate the models of business that could potentially work for these new players. Work also with your rights holder and partner to allow them to understand that, because having a discrepancy and a gap between what someone thinks their content is worth and what really someone is able to generate upon having their rights is a dangerous situation. So we're trying to bring that level of analysis and intelligence that certainly allows rights holders to be more informed at the hour of making their decisions around distribution. And then also from the other side, working with rather than against the people that are buying content as well. So in saying, okay, what is your model? Let us understand it a bit more. Well, the good thing is from our DAZN experience, we have a lot of understanding there. So we've been, building subscription economic models for a long time, and they continue to develop as things go on. But again, it's really important to speak the same language and adapt your discourse and adapt your approach here when thinking about distribution partnerships.
But it's not only thinking about what's the business model of your distribution partner, it's also understanding the way consumers and fans are consuming the content. I like to say that in a world where everything is personalized, today everything is personalized.
Yes.
Sport has one thing that makes it unique. It brings people together like nothing else does.
Absolutely.
It's the only content that it's consumed by appointment, that is consumed live in a world where everything is consumed on demand. But if you think about the consumption experience, it's very, as you said, one size fits all.
Yes.
And if I think about all the other entertainment experiences that I have in my day-to-day, all the experience is personalized. When I get into TikTok or YouTube, all the content I see there is personalized for me. When I go into Netflix and I see the recommendation, that's personalized to me. Even the advertising experience is personalized to me. If you think about sport, and if you think about traditional sponsorship model, there's no personalization. I mean, you buy Fly Emirates gets the front shirt of Real Madrid. The advertising experience is not personalized for every user, in everything. So I think the biggest opportunity we have as an industry is really how we can become better at personalizing the experiences to the fans.
I completely agree with that. And again, that example is what we mentioned before. Advancements in technology allows you to personalize, right? So that thing would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. What you're saying now is definitely the way in which things are going. I also kind of wanted to pull something on what you said there in terms of, let's just think about, okay, what are the difficulties, or why is the ecosystem more difficult now? So think about the value chain there. So you start with the content. Right now, we're living in a world where, yes, sport is unique in that, in terms of the appointment of view, is very special, unlike any other. But the reality is there is a huge proliferation of content. There is a huge mass of content in which we are all competing for eyeballs, ultimately. So you have a situation where the content, which is stage one there of the value chain, there's more of it than ever. Second thing is distribution. So the distribution side is obviously there's the ways in which we consume, the ways in which we are able to distribute content has changed entirely. The ways in which commercial models work, in terms of it's not as simple to just think about contracting via one pay TV, because the pay TV could then be carried by a telco or a different distributor. So again, there's much things. But then the one constant there is then the fan. So all of this, in the value chain, you go content, distribution, and the fan. The fan there, the great thing is going forward is people still love sport, and they will continue to love sport because it is unique and special. So if you add to what we've just said there, the proliferation of content, the more complex situation around distribution, that means that you as a rights holder have to think a little bit harder. Okay, so if I'm sitting in that situation, and also you have the additional layer, which is, okay, if we think about what were the main revenue drivers of the industry 10 years to what it is now, the majority were more traditional, were more linear. Now you have a situation where digital, whether that be either digital platforms that are charging subscription, digital platforms that are charging advertising, the lion's share of what is the revenue generation in the industry now is going digital, right? All of those new digital players require something very different to what the traditional players needed back then, right? So all these digital players, some of their leadership will come from finance backgrounds, and rightly so. We need to have a look at the data more because the data empowers us to understand. Okay, if we are optimizing or maximizing, what is the revenue or the value that we can provide there? What else can we be doing? Having a look closely at consumption to a different level that was not possible previously. Previously, the guys were just thinking about filling channels of content. Completely different situation now. So if you're thinking about that, you have more complex distribution. You have a huge amount of content. You, as a rights holder, you're thinking, okay, how do I make myself stand out? Or how do I find a distribution strategy which allows me to navigate this slightly different ecosystem, but in a possible way? That cannot be thinking the way in which things have previously done. That has to be, okay, if new technology is going to allow, and new technology and new consumption methods are going to allow me to unearth different revenue streams or monetization, what can I be doing in terms of my distribution plan to allow me to attack those? So yes, everyone is thinking about Amazon, Disney, Netflix. Amazon, again, literally we're just sitting here, and a couple of days ago we had the provisional results of the Champions League tender, right? Yeah. Again, huge, so led by streamers in the majority of the 5 top markets there in Europe. But again, if you look at they are compatible. Yes, they were split into packages, but it's a good example of how Amazon come in, will take a single package in multiple markets. Fair play, because they've been doing it for a number of years and they're fantastic at doing so. But they've only bought one match. But for them, that works fantastically because they can make their additional e-commerce work, and their business model is completely fueled by that. The other guys that are looking at that are really more dependent on generating and taking the base of subscribers that have a more subscription economics-led model, the likes of a DAZN, the likes of a Sky, the likes of a Paramount, that have really shaken the nest at the moment, depend more on having more volume, right? So again, it's a moving feast and a really, really fascinating time. And that's one example. There are 100 different examples, and I'd love to start touching about the digital side in terms of, we talk about the Casa TV example, which is a fascinating thing to touch on, which again, people need to take note. That was a very specific situation of what happens in Brazil, and we can go into a bit more detail around that, and they've done fantastically well. You know, we're now taking note and thinking, okay, is that replicable in other markets, right?